Hello everyone, welcome back to the Fetchquest podcast, where we talk about video games and more. I'm your host Guy, joined by my fellow co-host, Brewer.
Hello.
Connor.
Hello.
And our special guest today, Grayson Blaylock. Grayson Blaylock. Grayson, are you there?
Oh, sorry, Guy. I was just listening to some music.
What genre you listening to?
Oh, just some hard rock.
Better than country at least.
Everything is better than country, bro. We know this.
I don't give a shit about what genre y'all listening to. Video game musics are literally the best kind of music. Which brings us into today's topic. Video game musics. Again. Why do we love it? Is it better than normal music? Yes, it's better than normal music.
Yes.
But we're gonna be... But this definitely are... I'm very happy about doing this episode again, because for one, we have a special guest, Grayson, and two, we get to talk about like music more. But before we get into that, we have the usual special guest things where we ask Grayson 3 questions and then we get to the topic. So Grayson, introduce yourself. Who are you, man?
My name is Grayson.
Whoa, that's crazy.
Wonderful.
We're gonna ask you 3 questions pertaining to video games. First one being, why do you play video games?
So I started around 6 years old, and at that point, it's like, you know how people develop hobbies very early on, like they start reading books very early on, and they just, keep doing that, or, people become movie buffs. Yeah, that's me video game style.
Yeah. No, that's fair. My next question is, what is your favorite video game and why?
So, favorite video game is a tough question to answer. There are a lot of video games that do completely different things that I think do the best version of said aspect of video games. So I'm going to break down, like, a couple of those. Like, obviously, I'm going to go ahead and talk about, like, what I would probably categorize as my favorite video game of all time, which would be The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I know Tears of the Kingdom is the hot topic right now and is the seemingly objectively better game. However, by the time Tears of the Kingdom rolled around, the emotions that Breath of the Wild gave the public masses, and me included, had already passed, and Tears of the Kingdom was just a revisit to the world that had, like, kind of struck me in a way that hadn't before. So, I guess I'll start with Breath of the Wild as my main answer then.
That's awesome, man. That's Breath of the Wild it's a classic. It's a modern classic.
Yeah, I was about to say classic. It was 2017.
Now I feel old. Right. I'm about to get my cane out, get my walker.
Oh, that game is 7 years. The game is 7 years old. That's crazy.
It is 7 years old.
I was 13 when that came out.
Dude,
I was 17.
Oh my god. That's crazy.
Actually, I was 16. I hadn't turned 17 yet.
That's awesome. But I guess the final question that I will be asking you is, if there was a video game that you could replay for the first time again, what would it be? And why?
Okay, so a lot of people would actually say that Breath of the Wild would be their answer for someone who enjoys it the way that I do. However, for me, I have replayed Breath of the Wild more than twice, and every single time it is a completely new and unique experience, to the point to where, honestly, I don't feel the need to run through that first awe-inspiring emotions that I had the first time, because I enjoy every single playthrough differently, and I love that experience. So I would honestly say, I'm going to go completely left out of the field here and say that the video game that I would prefer to replay for the first time, never experiencing it, would be actually a game called Nier Replicant, one of Square Enix's insanely written storylines that, honestly, the first time I played that game, and it's been the only time I've played it, really, with all of its endings and all that, I've run through all of it, but, like, that's just a game that, like, that is a game that changed the way I write pretty much forever, honestly, because holy lord. But that's for, a different topic and a different reason. Although the
I
soundtrack
really need
is
to play
phenomenal.
one of the Nier games, especially Automata, because I've heard so many good things from it. I just haven't gotten around to playing them.
Both games are incredible. Both games have some of Square Enix's best soundtracks, and both games will change your life forever.
Yeah, I look for games that change my life forever,
man.
so...
And they're also short games. Like, running through every single ending in both Nier games is probably around a 25 to 30 hour experience. So
it's not bad at all.
Yeah, it's not bad.
It's not like you're running through Persona 5 multiple times. Like,
yeah, my playtime for Persona 3 right now is like 70 something hours, so it would be nice to play a short game.
It gets a little taxing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it'd be like that. But no, that's actually awesome. That's actually an answer I was not expecting. I was actually expecting Breath of the Wild because I mean that is a pretty like I'm not gonna say generic because like that game is anything but generic, but it is like it's a very reasonable take. But like to hear Nier, that's actually awesome.
Yeah, and like I said, the reason I don't want to like go through Breath of the Wild again for the first time, and it's like, sure, I would love to do that again. However, I am extremely content with the fact that every single new game that I make of Breath of the Wild turns into something completely different. So every single experience, every single like new time I play Breath of the Wild, it's a brand new experience. Even if it is the same game and the same world, I approach it completely differently every single time. And honestly, I prefer that over just having the repeated experience over and over again.
And that's completely fair, man. And that's awesome. I guess with that out of the way, we can start with the topic of the episode, video game music. So boys, can we admit some of our favorite songs, like ever, are probably from video games. Let's be for real.
Yeah. I ain't beating the just only listens to video game OST allegations at all.
Dude, I'm not beating that too.
Honestly, I don't think any of us are.
Yeah.
I think I beat them only because I have like a giant playlist of like songs now, and I think it's like up to like 400 at this point. I made it like last year because I wanted to beat those allegations.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I still have a lot of just like normal music I like, but the one I always come back to, the one I always love, is just game soundtracks. I think a big reason for that is just because like for just any other song, I'll just listen to it. I may try to interpret it directly from like the lyrics to try to find meaning in it and enjoy it. But with the games, whenever I'm playing it, I can think of like almost exactly what I was doing in the game whenever I hear a part of the song. So like try to get some emotion out of the track.
Yeah, I really get that. One of my favorite examples is that I have one of my favorite like video game songs is the Hollow Knight song. Like I think it's just called the Hollow Knight, and are you
referring to like the boss battle theme of the Hollow Knight?
Yes.
Okay, spoilers by the way. I sorry to spoil, but I did need that for clarity's sake.
Hey, make it light spoilers.
Yeah, I'm not going to be mentioning anything about the fight. It's just that the song itself just gives me so many memories to that fight, and every time it makes me like just both super hyped and also super emotional because of how good of a track it is.
Who here have played Hollow Knight? I know I have.
Me, obviously.
Need to play it. That's why I say no spoilers.
Yeah, I also need to play it.
That's fair.
Man, we're gonna have a long game to-do list by the end of this episode. I need to play Nier and Hollow Knight.
Yeah, that's just how it tends to go.
Yeah, it always goes like that.
Yep.
But going along like what you said with like Hollow Knight, the thing about that is that like that game has a very dynamic soundtrack. It knows when to switch from like calm and somber because you're exploring a kingdom that's pretty much empty and dying, but it also knows like when to elevate its moments very high with like very bombastic high action music, and it does it in a way that doesn't seem jarring at all. And that's something I love about like a lot of video game musics and soundtracks in general, that I can actually Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom does this a lot too, where the music, it's not like you don't notice it at first, but it's just like it sets the mood. But when you need it for like combat situations, it kicks in. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think with games, like the one benefit they have over just like a regular soundtrack, like some I listen to on Spotify, is they have the added enhancement of like what's happening in the game, so you can build the soundtrack around that. Like I love soundtracks that will like change depending on what's happening in the game, especially like the most common one, like boss fight kicks into phase 2. The soundtrack is going to change. Like Skies of Arcadia, I absolutely love that game, and also its soundtrack. And one of the big reasons for that is during a lot of the big fights, if you were doing a really good job at kicking the boss's ass, they would change up the soundtrack to reflect that. Or if you were dying, it would also reflect that as well, with a more like eerie, suspenseful tone versus like a really upbeat and triumphant tone with the songs. Like I just love to see that with games.
And that's fair. Dude, it's so having that triumphant music like kind of just makes it feel more impactful. Because like we've talked about this in the previous episode as well, that like music has the ability to set tones and make you feel certain ways, like for the direction that the game creators are wanting you to feel. And it's like it's an extra layer of immersion that like really drives the point home.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like I want to hear y'all's thoughts about this again, because I know we talked about it like about a year ago, but like I do want to like go over some of these thoughts again.
Trying to think.
Grayson, Connor.
So, repeat the question.
I'm just talking about how like music is just it's an extra layer of like immersion factor that just like it drives the point home for people in some instances for like an experience of a video game. I was just wondering like your thoughts about that.
I think it's true, because I know there are some like sequences in games or like experiences that a good reason that I remember them is in fact it's due to, at least partly, because of how good the music was. Like, you know, like you're in an epic boss fight and like the music swells at the perfect time and you get a final hit or something. Like I remember that, like memories like that. So I do very much agree that those things can very much like music definitely can drive the emotions and can build like memories all on their own when it comes to video games.
Well, I think for just immersion as well, like a good or bad soundtrack can be the difference between like me being completely immersed in a game versus being like, man, time to pop that disc out, this is ass.
Yeah, I agree.
My personal take is that, well, the most important aspect of a video game is obviously the gameplay. I think the second most important part of a video game is not the storyline, but the soundtrack. And I can cite quite a few games where that is irrevocably true. Specifically, games like the Pokemon franchise. Very notably, Mario games. A lot of people recognize Mario games for both, you know, it being Jumpman, but almost every single person hears the Mario theme and they recognize that literally instantly. And there are several Mario soundtracks that is in the public limelight to a degree that even Final Fantasy VII's storyline isn't as well known.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You know what? You're kind of real about that, because like, no, you're actually spitting on that, because actually a lot of people they'll remember soundtracks more than they do actual like some plot beats in video games. They'll always tell me like the biggest spoiler of all time for Final Fantasy VII. Obviously, I'm not going to say it, but people know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
They'll never like they'll always mention that, but they'll never mention like what Cloud's character arc is in that game.
Yeah.
They'll always like, oh, do you remember the final battle with Sephiroth and One Winged Angel? So like you're kind of cooking on that. Like, a lot of people do that.
Everybody recognizes One Wing Angel. They always recognize the main theme of 7. They always recognize the battle theme. They recognize Aerith's theme. They recognize, you know, Zack's theme even. Like, pretty much every single, like, you know, people recognize themes far more often than they recognize storylines, and frankly, for me, that is because a soundtrack can genuinely make or break a plotline.
Yeah, I mean, hell, sometimes with the soundtrack, like, some people will listen to soundtracks from games that, like, they haven't even played or that will get them into a game. Like, I know, like, there are so many people that, like, have not played Persona 5, but will listen to the soundtrack because they like it. It's chill.
It's because Last
You know what's
Surprise just has that effect on people.
Yeah,
True.
that are beneath
You know
the
what's
mask.
funny? Liam, he's playing through P5 now, like for the first time ever, but he has gone on to say that his favorite video game soundtrack is probably Persona 5.
That is very funny considering he hasn't even heard like the final boss's theme.
Oh, at all. Which I think is insane, but that's just telling to like how like impactful music is to people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to go on top of Grayson's point, and like I kind of I agree. I think the soundtrack is actually more important than story. Like some of my favorite games, admittedly, do not have great stories, but God, they kill it with the soundtracks. And one of the biggest examples is Monster Hunter for me.
There are so many games that are like Monster Hunter. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. Like, bro, I was about to ask. Like, you come on, you cannot tell me like a single like thing about the plot of Monster Hunter Rise like that makes sense, or just why set thing
Monster
is.
Hunter, I love it, but it's never been about the story. Like the stories have gotten better over time. Like I know with 4 Ultimate, people really like that story. Like I enjoyed it growing up. That and with Generations, the story was kind of not there because it was just a celebration. So they were just combining a whole lot of different plot lines, like it was some Avengers Endgame type shit. And then Rise, I was like, okay, that's cool and all. Lady dressed in red, but let me go fight the fucking purple flame bitch.
And
Now here's my question. Can I asking you this? Do you remember the theme of Gormagala or Crimson Glow Valstrax?
Oh, of course I do. I especially Crimson Glow Valstrax. I remember every damn time I think wanted to crash into me from the soundtrack. Or every time I think soared into the air.
But that makes sense though. That's because music just has that effect. You know what I mean?
Or Kizu's theme. I love Kizu's theme.
Okay, the joke with Kizu. This is really funny. Kizu was a monster in Monster Hunter that how do I explain this? When monsters engage with you in combat, when they see you, they start the battle theme or like their own unique theme. Kizu doesn't have eyes. So, because of that, he can't see you, meaning his theme can't start. So he'll fight you, but there's no theme that plays.
It's just completely silent while you're fighting it. I mean, for as creepy as a monster as Kizu is, like, that is kind of fitting, but
Okay.
we had a very funny story where we were trying to get Connor to look up Kizu's theme
Yeah,
for like an
I was
hour.
about to say that. I was about to say, can I tell the funny story of when you guys collectively gaslit me into thinking they actually had a theme?
Yeah, Connor, look up Kizu's theme. It's so baller.
The entire reason I fell for it is because when I looked it up, it was complete silent. So but I had thought that it, like, because the channels had reposted them, it wasn't like the Capcom official. I was like, oh, maybe they just all got like copyrighted or something, and so the audio is not there. And so for the longest time, I genuinely was like, oh, they just like, I bet it really does like a super cool theme. And then I had to unfortunately learn that I'd been gaslit.
It's so funny.
It was so damn funny. Especially because we added in real recommendations, and they're like, yeah, Crimson Glow Valstrax's theme, Proof of a Hero, Fatalis theme, Amatsu,
yeah,
and Kizu.
I'd like to kind of interject for a second. I'd like to say that, in my personal opinion, while every game obviously needs gameplay, like of the big four categories of gameplay, soundtrack, graphics, and storyline, every game needs a gameplay. Not every game needs good graphics. Not every game even needs a storyline, but every game also needs a good soundtrack.
Yeah,
You're not going to
Yeah,
enjoy.
no, that's
You're not
yeah.
going to enjoy Super Mario Bros. In just raw silence. You're not even going to. It's not even going to be easy to play the game because you need sound design as a whole, not just soundtrack. But the soundtrack is what gets you into it, where the soundtrack or the sound design makes understanding a lot of the core mechanics necessary.
I will say this one thing since you brought up Mario Bros. Like somewhat recently, I played Super Mario Land, which was like the first Mario game on a handheld. It was on the Game Boy, and you could tell it was an early Game Boy game along with the first handheld Mario, because Lord, is it limited? Like it's an hour long. Mario, like he already looked kind of weird in the NES version, but now he's just even more crushed down somehow. But the one thing I do remember the most about Super Mario Land is what they did with the soundtrack, because I like the songs in Super Mario Land more than like just Mario Bros on the NES, because somehow they made that scrappy little Game Boy produce like genuinely great songs.
Yeah.
To where like I see its songs used in like so many different videos.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, Grayson knows what I'm talking
No,
about.
Like,
No, that's fair. What were we saying, Grayson?
oh no, I was just like, yeah, Brewer was just talking about the soundtrack, and I was just reciting the soundtrack.
My man's was jamming
No,
out
that's fair.
because it's a baller
No, that's
soundtrack.
It's a baller soundtrack, and that's just how pretty much every video game makes itself recognizable. Is, like humans process things auditory better than they process things visually. So games that are pretty but sound awful aren't going to be nearly as well receptive to us as
I mean,
games
I guess
that sound pretty and look awful.
I guess you are right, since I mean, they do say, like, I think for a lot of people when they go, the last sense they lose is their hearing, so sound is the most important.
That is true.
So I'm just
Yeah,
saying, guys, if you don't play the SMT4 boss theme at my funeral, all of you mean nothing to me.
Well, I was one to also bring up stuff of like how music can definitely make things more iconic, because it's like, I know this is a kind of an easy example, but do you really think like Sans would be this as big as an
Not at
icon
all.
as he is?
Not in the
If he
slightest.
did, yeah, exactly. Like Megalovania is like, at least
A catchy song is everything.
yeah.
People recognize Sans specifically for his theme, to the point to where his theme quite literally became an internet sensation. And actually, a lot of Toby Fox's soundtracks became like inspirations. Like
Recognizable.
yeah,
Oh,
like the God, what's his name? I'm blanking on him actually. The Papyrus theme, for one, is something that everyone recognizes. The Megalovania, very obviously, everyone recognizes Hopes and Dreams.
Oh yeah.
Like, people recognize Toriel's theme, they recognize Flowey's theme, they recognize Asgore is who I was thinking. Everyone recognizes Asgore's theme.
The final boss's theme as well.
Yeah, it's like,
Oh, God,
a
yeah,
lot of
that
people
one's
recognize Undertale for being this feel-good storyline of, choosing peace over, violence, but they also recognize, like, almost every single theme, and people who don't play the games have heard the themes several times.
Yeah, another one that a lot of people probably won't come to mind is the date start theme. Like that one is also pretty iconic to me, mainly because that is the song that Alfred uses for his ads, and so that has become like ingrained in my memory.
I do want to shout out Toby Foxer since you just mentioned that. Like none of his songs he will ever copyright you for on YouTube, and a lot of
Yes.
times he just said you could straight up just recreate his sounds because he used free software. So you can just
exactly.
use his
Like,
music. So like,
I
shout
mean,
out
so
to
this-
Toby Fox, so we don't
Alright,
get
so
copyright.
for the rest of this entire podcast, we can just have Toby Fox music playing in the background, is what you're saying.
exactly.
Yes.
We quite literally
Exactly.
do use a lot of his songs. So.
I mean, like, you know, that's actually kind of something I wanna also kind of touch up on a little bit. But like, if you know of a game's existence, you know of a soundtrack in that game. Like, you know, Final Fantasy VII's very famous scene is famous for a lot of reasons, but you know, almost as many people, if not just as many people, recognize Aerith's theme or Sephiroth's theme. In fact, most everyone recognizes Sephiroth's theme. It's been memed to hell and back on YouTube and thrown into several different formats. I've seen
When
it put in
when
the
people-
Mario and the Luigi format, the Donkey Kong format.
Dude, when people heard the first 3 notes of it and Sephiroth's reveal trailer for Smash, even before that man was shown, everyone was yelling, Sephiroth! Oh my god, he's so hot!
And yeah, it's like, you know, and back to the kind of like the Toby Fox and Sans thing is like, you know, Toby Fox, like, Megalovania is one of the only songs in all of Mii costumes, like, to be put into the game as a song.
You're
In fact,
right.
it might be the only one. It might be the only instance where a Mii costume got a song to go alongside.
Nope, no, Cuphead did as well.
Oh,
They got a
Cuphead.
Yeah, I was
remix
just
of,
about to mention Cuphead.
of the Feisty Flower, I think.
Yeah, it was the
And
flower
I think
So,
boss.
one of
Shantae
two-
got a theme as well.
So one of like 2-3 instances.
I'm sorry to immediately counter your point, Grayson.
No, you're right.
Man's literally hit him with the objection.
Objection.
I did. I hit him with that Ace Attorney objection.
Boom, 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 boom,
Objection.
Everyone
You're
recognizes.
right.
Everyone recognizes the objection theme too.
Ace Attorney
Yeah,
has some baller
exactly.
tracks.
It's pretty, like, for a game that's a glorified point-and-click visual novel, like, everyone recognizes, like, a lot of people recognize Ace Attorney soundtracks.
Yeah, I really need to play the Ace Attorney games because like they just
They're
seem like
very
so.
good.
Yeah, they seem like incredibly good and fun.
Okay, sweet. You and Guy have stuff to do on your to-do list now. Both of you need to play Ace Attorney, because I love it, and it's peak.
It is peak. His Trials and Tribulations is the best one. Well, actually, the Great Ace Attorney Duology
No, I was about to
is
say,
the best one.
Great Ace Attorney Duology is the best.
Yeah, Trials and
I
Tribulations
love-
follows after that, and then...
If you say
know.
Sherlock Holmes instead of Herlock Sholmes, you
Oh
are
no,
a real fan.
I've been completely, you know, irrevocably changing my vernacular to say Herlock Sholmes instead of...
If your life hasn't been changed by yelling out motherfucking Herlock Sholmes when he does some baller shit on screen, then
like-
you are not a real gamer.
One of my favorite scenes is just like they're just in the museum, you know, Naruto's talking to someone else, and you know, Herlock Sholmes is pretending to be a wax statue, and then, you know, he gets mentioned, and he starts doing like, you know, he starts like rolling around, he starts punching the air, and it's like, you know, that's just how video games do it. And honestly, I recognize nearly every single Greatest Attorney soundtrack.
I love Great Ace Attorney. I love me some motherfucking Herlock Sholmes. But let's get back to music since we've been on that a little too long.
No, that's fair. But that's the thing. Like, that's just that's music for you, though. It's like it makes things iconic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But here's a point I want to bring up. Oh, was someone about to say something?
I don't think so.
Okay. I want to bring up a topic. I might have the controversial opinion. I do not usually like video game remixes, or at least fan-made remixes.
They're hit or miss. It's like a 50-50 for me.
Honestly,
Yeah.
I was going to ask y'all about that.
So I think it depends on what type it is. Because recently I have been listening to like a lot of video game lo-fi mixes in order to help me like study and get work done for school. And one of my favorites is this mini series called like Zelda Wave that does like lo-fi versions of like Zelda, Ocarina of Time, and Majora's Mask music, and they're all really good. But you know that's just me because I do know I've heard a few remixes of like video game music in my time that have been like very not good. We'll say not good.
Yeah, I've heard some that
Yeah.
like they change it up too much, that or like they focus on different aspects of the song. Like I remember there was this remix, I can't remember who did it, but like as a remix of Burn My Dread for the original Persona 3. And like when I was listening to it, I was like, okay, this is cool and all, but it sounds like the person singing was like getting recorded from the hallway next door or from like another room or a different house, because I cannot hear them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
But
no, that's fair. And I was actually about to make the point that like I think my least favorite video game remixes, or at least the fan made ones, are the ones that change the lyrist.
Hmm.
Like the person who sings, the singer.
yeah, I can see that
Well,
because
that kind of varies. I like seeing some people try to take their own take on the song. That, and I can always appreciate someone like trying to put their own spin on it for like a series they love. To try to sing it in their own voice in maybe a different way. It's just that thing of like, is the original, do I love it so much that it's hard for me to show appreciation for this? Or just not listen to the original version instead? Maybe that's what it is.
yeah, I think it depends. Again, it really because it does have to do with like I think emotional connection because it's like if you hear like for example like Persona 5 Royals intro theme like that is like Colors Flying High I think like I've heard remixes of that before and I sometimes I just can't get connected to it because the lyrics is so different but I think that's just because how good the original like singer of that song is.
Oh yeah, Lynn. Yeah, no, Lynn does an
Yeah,
incredible job.
incredible singer.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And that's just like that's definitely like a point to be made though. Is that like the music like for well-made music, usually the directors and the composers, they have a certain way of how they want people to feel about certain songs. Like they want a certain emotion to be captured, which sometimes just isn't captured in fan remixes, which is why I feel like they're kind of hit and miss, if that makes
Well,
sense.
also this one thing, I think with a fan remix, what could make it easier or harder to like get invested in is if it has a fan game to go along with it. And what I partially mean with that is, like I mentioned before, with a game, part of the reason you will feel so connected to a soundtrack is because of like what you remember happening in the game, what you experienced while the soundtrack was playing. So like, was I fighting this enemy, hit him at the crucial moment, and the soundtrack changed because of that? Was I fighting a boss? Or like, was this one really calm area that I liked, playing some relaxing music? If the remix has a fan game to like go along with that, that maybe also reflects it in the same way the original game did, I think you could have an easier time like feeling a vibe for the soundtrack. But if it's just the remix that's like thrown out onto YouTube, you'll try to connect it to like the original feelings you had connected to the original version of the song that was connected to the game. When it's trying to like maybe do something different, it's gonna make it hard for you to connect.
Yeah, but I think another because we've been talking all about fan made here. What about like official remixes for like re-releases or remakes of games?
That's
I
a good
also
one.
think they're hit or miss.
Very much so, yeah.
I think this is one that I like that happened very recent that I feel like a lot of people can agree on. The Mass Destruction remake for Persona 3 Reload is so much worse than the original.
It's not bad, but I always try to ambush the enemies in Persona 3 Reload.
For a reason.
I think they put so much of their energy into its going down now that when they did Mass Destruction, they're like, okay, we need a new one to sound better.
Which is really sad, because, like, Mass Destruction, like, it was really iconic in the Persona series. It was like it's the burn my bread meme, ha ha ha. But, like, that doesn't mean we don't want it to see improvements or, like, be just as good as the original, because, like, it's sad, because, like, Persona 3, especially as a video game, oh god, so many people wanted a remake for it. I wanted a remake for a long time, just so I didn't have to play the game where I couldn't control my party members. It was completely RNG and with shitty AI. You know what I mean? But like,
Yeah.
but to have that like music just be objectively worse than the original is just like really sad, in my opinion. Because
Well,
I'm not
I
going
will
to be
say
able to
this
experience
too
the
for
battles.
a remake. Well, I am glad they put those new themes in, like trying to like freshen up the game since like Full Moon, Full Life, and It's Going Down now, along with like all the other teams like Color Your Night, are very good. Like, still make sure to include the options for the old game in there, which
I
I
agree.
think they may be doing, but that's with their shitty expansion pass. So fuck you, Atlas.
Yeah. How many
That's
videos
true.
will the Fetchquest crew go without mentioning Persona 3 Reload's shitty DLC?
0.
You're kind of
Yeah.
okay. You're kind of real for
I
that.
will say
Grayson, I want to hear your thoughts about
I
it. Oh,
do.
you first. You first.
This one last bit before we move on with the others' thoughts. I do think they still Lotus Juice and let me make sure I'm pronouncing this right. Let's see what Spotify is. Azumi Takahashi. I think the work they did on soundtrack is great, and they did show a lot of appreciation for it. Because like in Full Moon, Full Life, along with talking about like a lot of the story in Persona 3, they do reference like the older song by like saying "Burn My Dread" at the end, or "Burn Your Dread,"
Yeah.
to like pass it on to the player to say like try to tell you the mission you're on, in a way.
Yeah.
So, and I still think their Mass Destruction remix, it's still pretty good. I mean, it's not as good as like It's Going Down now, or the original Mass Destruction, but I still think they did a good job with it. I don't want to hate on them too much because it's still a fantastic soundtrack. And thank God they put it on Spotify.
Grayson, that's fair. Grayson, I wanted to ask your opinion about this topic because I know you were playing through Final Fantasy VII Rebirth currently,
Yes.
and I've heard the soundtrack of that game. It is fantastic, but I wanted your opinion on it because I know a few days ago we actually had a discussion about the music. So I wanted your opinion on like the remake section to this.
So as
Or
far as
remixes.
soundtracks go for remakes, I think it entirely depends on the company who makes the soundtrack. So this is insanely weird, but I firmly believe that Square Enix is just practically perfect when it comes to making video game soundtracks, and their remakes respect the quality of the music, the instrumentation quite well. However, there are some other games where I've played where that respect doesn't seem to fully translate, and I'm going to be highly controversial in saying this, and I mean highly controversial in saying this, but I think Pokemon remakes don't often make soundtracks that respect the original vision unless they're making a brand new soundtrack entirely. So for like Heart Gold and Soul Silver, we adore a lot of those soundtracks, and that's entirely because a lot of those soundtracks are just new soundtracks. But the soundtracks that aren't new and are instead simply remade versions, I think the original Game Boy Color versions were just flat out better, and I think this is most notably known in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, and this is... I want to addendum that by saying that's not me being biased towards those games, because those games are my favorite remakes of the Pokemon franchise, but I genuinely think there are a lot of Aura soundtracks that are just flat out worse than their, Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald versions.
Well, I do think there is one interesting note to say with those remakes, is in that the technological difference, because we mentioned before, like Super Mario Land and whatnot, they had to work with technology that could like hardly even store any data for sound. So
Yes.
a lot of the remixes they're adapting, it was like for the Game Boy Color, that it like you can store shit on a Game Boy cartridge, hardly an NES cartridge either. So adapting tracks that like had to work with those limitations. So now, like, you have a DS that has like full sound capability, or like at least a hell of a lot more than a Game Boy.
Yeah.
How are you gonna live up to just like people's childhood memories?
Well, see,
on
I
that?
can.
I think that's what, when you were saying people love the new tracks a lot more.
Yeah, I can.
I think that's
I can
because
also kind of.
maybe some nostalgia.
Yeah, and I can address that as well. I think a lot of that, like, again, I think it fully depends on the company, because I think Fire Emblem is there are a few games in the Fire Emblem franchise I want to talk about when we get to the games in general section, but there are multiple Fire Emblem remakes that, the oldest Fire Emblem game is on the NES, and the first Fire Emblem remake is a DS game. So you jump all the way from 1990 to 2011, or it was 2009 maybe, it's in that range, but you jump all the way like 20 years, and what Shadow Dragon does, the remake of the first game, is actually takes the soundtrack and adapts it incredibly well. Fire Emblem Echoes, the remake of the second game in the franchise, is famous for having one of the best soundtracks in the entire franchise, even as a remake. But I just think some companies, specifically the Pokemon company, don't what they do. And this is what I've noticed, is that what they do is they tend to kind of copy paste their soundtracks into a new sound font, and they don't really address for the new lack of limitations they have. So what they do is that the way the limitations worked for the Game Boy Color or wherever other, console they were using, what that company tends to do is it doesn't tend to account how those limitations made it work on that specific console rather than how it works now. It's not that it's not that they could have done better, it's that it honestly, in a lot of cases, just sounds worse thanks to different sound fonts, requiring different aspects of instrumentation. So what they do is that, where sometimes they'll make, a lot of older soundtracks, they didn't like to use mercados or anything like that. They didn't like to have sustained notes because chiptunes don't sound very good when they're sustained. So a lot of it was staccato heavy or mercado heavy, and when you remake that soundtrack in a sound font that really likes the ability to have sustained notes, the sanctity of the fact that now it just sounds, like that is accentuated so hard to where it's very noticeable.
You know what? I agree on a lot of this, actually. Like, I know you said that it was controversial that like the remakes and whatnot, like, they just don't capture what like some of those like old games could have had. And you know what? You're cooking on the DS thing, and it's just like, one point I kind of want to bring up, just like a little side note, is that when you think of people, like when people bring up Gen 3 or their music and they use it for edits and whatnot, what do they always use? They always use the original, the originals.
Yeah, and that's also something I kind of want to touch upon too, actually. Like, it just clicked with me. I forgot to mention this earlier, is that the console-wise, the Wii was the first video game console in Nintendo's library that allowed full orchestration. Like, you didn't need like a sound font anymore. Like, Super Mario Galaxy doesn't use a generalized like MIDI soundtrack. It uses a genuine orchestra. And the first handheld console that was capable of doing that was the 3DS. So it took quite a while, because the 3DS released, several years after the Wii. But when you get to the 3DS, now every other soundtrack you're going to hear is orchestrated, such as, Kid Icarus. Kid Icarus Uprising was one of the first 3DS games, and it has one of the most memorable soundtracks in the entire library. So when we got to Emerald, when we got to the remakes of Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, what we had was an orchestra that didn't quite translate, because you're moving a sound font MIDI track to an orchestra.
Yeah, well, I think in Kid Icarus Uprising's case, if I remember correctly, I think a lot of the tracks were just like also the case of being brand new, because Kid Icarus didn't have like shit for decades. Because like Pit's design in Kid Icarus Uprising was like a redesign they had in Brawl, until Sakura came in and be like, let's make a game for this guy, because he hasn't had one in like 2 decades.
Yeah, and the original like Kid Icarus and Kid Icarus 2 and all that, they have very limited soundtracks. I'm pretty sure they've got a very, very small amount of soundtracks.
Yeah, similar to Super Mario Land, NES and Game Boy, so very limited technology at the time they had to work with.
Yeah, the most famous Kid Icarus soundtrack you hear from the NES is the one that actually plays in the opening of Kid Icarus Uprising. So you hear the Kid Icarus Uprising theme, and you think this is a banger. Yeah, and that's a remade soundtrack. Like, That's not a leap motive that plays off of the melody. That's just the soundtrack remade. 18 years later is the constant running joke of Kid Icarus Uprising is that there was a 18-year difference between Uprising and the game that came before.
Man, I would
Yeah.
kill for a new Kid Icarus game.
Honestly, if they just
Dude,
ported
okay.
Uprising, we'd be fine.
Please, Nintendo, please.
Going with the meme of this episode of our logs are gonna get so much bigger by the end of this episode. Yeah, I still need to play Kid Icarus Uprising.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
I hope that they
that's-
ported it too, because the 3DS eShop is down. You can't
Yeah.
play the online for Kid Icarus Uprising anymore either, because the servers are shut down.
Yeah, I heard
That sucks.
Kid Icarus Online was
It was something
Whack.
else. Yeah, it was
It was
interesting.
it was more intense than Kirby Air Ride online matches, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah.
Like, it was just straight scrapping. Like, it was the closest thing we'd gotten to like a Halo free for all, like.
Yeah, on a Nintendo system.
And the like meta that came from that was insane. But anyways,
Yeah.
No, yeah, of course. That's God. That's just goes into like another point about like Nintendo. Like they take so many L's, and like a lot of them can actually be attributed to music. What's another remake series that I know they kind of struggle with in terms of remake, like for music?
That's
I know there was one recently that people hated.
recently that hit. That's hard for me to remember.
As in recent, I mean like a couple years ago.
Okay.
no, I don't know. I can think about.
I
Something
forget what
like,
it was.
well, I was gonna say, is that something recently, like super recently, that I've seen like a small bit of controversy over is the like Thousand Year Door remake and how it's doing some of its music. Because it's been like
Yes, that's what it was.
I mean,
that's what
I've heard-
that's what I was.
I've heard
hearing.
stuff online, but I don't think I've heard controversy. I've heard people say good things, especially because it's a remake that is giving you the option to have the old sound effects and soundtrack in it, if I remember correctly.
I think you're
Oh,
thinking
really?
of Mario RPG.
No. Like it's straight up been confirmed. Like, Thousand Year Door, the remake. There's a badge you can equip that will just put all the old sound effects and
Oh
soundtrack in.
yeah, they also did that for Mario RPG. That's why I was thinking.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
I completely forgot that had happened, and so, but when you said it, I was like, oh yeah, they did do that.
I kind of want to interject for a minute, and because I just remembered as you were talking about Mario, it's like we were talking about remixes, and I don't know if I zoned out during this, but did we even cover Super Smash Brothers?
No, we did not.
Oh my God!
The fact
we didn't.
that is the game company or the game series that remixes so many themes.
Okay,
They had the
I was shitting on remixes a second ago, but I do think Smash has some of the best remixes, but also some of the worst.
Mhm.
Which kind of goes alongside the point of that it's kind of half and half.
Yeah, I very much agree with you on that. Some Smash remixes, I'm like, what did they do to my boy?
So Smash Bros is like kind of responsible for, the fact that okay, so everyone recognizes the Fire Emblem theme from Melee, but what they don't recognize is that the first half of the Melee version of the Fire Emblem theme is not actually the Fire Emblem theme, but the recruitment theme. Whereas the actual main theme of Fire Emblem appears halfway through and is far shorter than the rest of the theme.
That's really funny.
So, like, when I remember when I played Super Smash Bros. Melee all the time, I was like, this is one of the greatest themes ever. You played it on Hyrule Temple after holding L and R down. You're like, this theme is a banger. I loved playing as Marth and Roy at the same time, and I remember, way later when I became like the Fire Emblem fan of all time, where like I was like, where's the Fire Emblem theme? I was like, and I hear the main theme, and it wouldn't click with me because that was the back half of the Smash Melee version.
Some of their music choices can
I
be
see.
interesting. Like, I still do not get, like, we'll get remixes for like all the Animal Crossing themes and whatnot, but you know they couldn't put God Shattering Star in like a straight up battle theme.
The fact that God Shatters,
Like one of the best songs in Three Houses, they didn't put that in.
There are so many soundtrack choices that are interesting. The fact that like, and you know, we can talk about how much, you know, we like or dislike Sora and Smash, but like these soundtrack choices that they made for putting that in there, like you have the Hollow Bastion theme and you don't have like the Traverse Town theme.
Dude, I'm not even a Kingdom Hearts fan, and why the hell was Simple and Clean not there? Or like a remix of it?
You don't like, there are instrumental versions of Simple and Clean. Like, you know, that just exists within the games themselves. Like, you didn't have that. You didn't have the Roxas theme. You didn't have the Riku theme. You didn't have the Maleficent theme. Like,
well, I can see why the Maleficent theme may not be there because, you know, copyright.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't have the Ansem theme.
Yeah.
You didn't have like, you know, you didn't have You didn't have any version of Wind Wing Angel. There are multiple versions of Wind Wing Angel and Kingdom.
Okay, well that was added with Sephiroth.
Yeah, like, but you don't have any of the organization themes. You don't have anything from Kingdom Hearts 2 or 3. By the way, I should mention, you don't have Sanctuary, you don't have Simple and Clean, you don't have Face Your Fears. Like, we got...
Well, I was just gonna say it is. I think it is partly due because I remember when like Cloud first got added, wasn't there like 2 songs from Final Fantasy?
Yeah, and Smash 4 because
Yep. Yeah,
Square
Smash
Enix
4.
sucks ass.
Yep.
Yeah, that was actually what I was about to say. That like Square Enix just has
it's
have a
both
really
Square
shitty method
Enix
of, like-
and like Disney, so it's like
I'll actually kind of interject on like, it feels weird to get on Square Enix's defense for this, but a lot of like the reason that Square
Their
Enix
composer.
copyright, yeah, the reason that Square Enix copyright is so weird when it comes to like getting soundtracks in any collab is because most of the time, the company isn't what actually owns those soundtracks. Usually, it is the composer. Like, Yoko Shimomura owns most of her music. That's not actually Square Enix's music. Like, so they would have to contact her alongside other Square Enix execs, and usually that is an annoying process, and writing that contract is an annoying process. So what they would be doing if they wanted to put Yoko Shimomura's like themes into Smash Bros, usually what they would have to do is they would actually have to talk to Square Enix, then Yoko Shimomura, and have both of them talk about a contract.
Yeah, I want to say Square Enix has that problems though, even in their own damn games, because like Dragon Quest XI, like notoriously had that issue with like at least the original version, where
orchestra not being in the
they had the MIDI tracks and then the orchestrated tracks, and the damn composer like only wanted the MIDI tracks in the game because wanted to sell the orchestrated tracks on some shitty CD or something.
Well, see, the fun thing is that that composer was a denier of quite a few things and ended up on pretty much everyone's hit list because of the things he said publicly.
Oh, well, maybe let's not delve into that too much, but
yeah,
either
but
way,
like no one really liked him at all.
Even, that guy.
even within Square Enix, not a lot of people liked him because And as much as I love Dragon Quest as games, and as much as I love their soundtracks, I do have to kind of admit that a lot of the times the soundtracks sound is so similar that, frankly, if someone played the battle theme from nearly every single game, and if it was in the same sound file, I would not be able to tell you what game it was from.
Damn.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, they kind of go for like a how do I put this, a medieval fantasy style, which I mean it makes sense. They're consistent and it's good at like building the world, but like that is a definite issue I see with most Dragon Quest music, and it's just like not only that, but like if you think of the Dragon Quest music in Smash, like besides like the main theme and maybe like one or two like boss themes, like name like one that's distinct.
Yeah, and
I do mean with that point.
And I love the Dragon Quest soundtrack and all that, but, at some point, I just kind of had to recognize that, like, I could honestly, like, I could tell you, like, what the Dragon Quest VIII battle theme is, I could recognize the Dolmegas theme, I could recognize quite a few themes from 9 even, but, like, Honestly, if you put all those themes in the same sound file, I'm just looking at you and I'm just going, are you telling me these aren't from the same game?
I think it's one of those cases where like there are a good couple bangers in there, but then like some of the more general tracks you won't remember. Like with Persona 3, there's like a bunch of bangers I love, but I could tell you where like a bunch of different sound parts of the soundtrack were from just by listening to it, because it was all unique and I loved every part of it. I just have some songs that I really love compared to the other ones.
Yeah, and
I
it's
think that's also that's a sign of a good composer when you can tell where it's from, because that means they did a good job of making it distinct and memorable.
Yeah,
that's
I was actually, I was wanting to say, like, what are some of, if we have any, what are our favorite composers, like, in when it comes to video game music?
Hmm.
I can start this off if you
yeah.
guys
Go ahead
want
and
some
do that.
time to think about it.
Go for it, yeah.
Yeah, so I will say, besides Toby Fox, because that's an obvious one. My like second favorite would have to be Christopher Larkin from Hollow Knight. Like the
Oh,
Hollow
that's a good
Knight,
one.
yeah, the Hollow Knight soundtrack is so incredibly good. Like I really hesitate to think of like one genuinely bad track in that entire like OST, which really goes to show like how good of a composer Larkin is. Because like a few highlights that aren't spoilery. The like first Hornet theme is really good, and actually like a really good fun fact that I always am really impressed is that Hornet's entire theme is all strings. There's no other like music. It's all strings because that's like an essential part of her like attacks is that she uses a string to like get around and stuff like
Oh,
that.
that's awesome.
For con for context, Hornet is the she's one of the primary characters in Hollow Knight, and she's also going to be the main protagonist in Hollow Knight Silk Song.
Silk
What
Song.
do you
That,
It's
mean?
that
actually
game isn't
really
Yeah,
releasing.
yeah. What do you mean? What
Guy,
do you mean
that's
she
like a
is?
rumor. That's a fan game.
Yeah,
you're
what
so
do you mean
right.
she's going to be a primary protagonist? It's never coming out.
Hey.
No, she's gonna be
15
the
years.
she's gonna be the protagonist. But as I was saying though, it's like that's actually sick as fuck because her boss fights in Hollow Knight, and also like from what we've seen in Hollow Knight Silk Song, is that like her movesets are primarily use of like her sword, which is called a nail, with like alongside a string that she uses, kind of like a grapple hook.
That's pretty badass.
Yeah, and it's so because it's like it doesn't even like it's one of the best tracks in that soundtrack in my opinion because it's some because you would usually think that if it only has one variant or like one instrument class, I don't really know the terminology, but one you know section of music, it would be bad. But it is honestly one of the most like in like it always gets me hyped up. It always makes me excited, and I always just feel like it's such a good track, and it always impresses me that it is fully like strings.
There,
It's crazy that like they're able to do that too.
yeah.
Yeah, and I could go on more, but I do want to also mention that one of my by far my favorite music technique is leitmotifs, however you say it, um, because because of how you can tell a story within music with leitmotifs. And Christopher Larkin is a really, besides Toby Fox, I think Christopher Larkin is probably the second best when it comes to incorporating like leitmotifs within the music in order to tell a story.
Yeah, and then that's awesome. Like, especially in a game like Hollow Knight where there's no verbal dialogue, or at least like understandable dialogue, like verbal dialogue. It makes sense. It's good that like they have music to like insinuate like how people should or like feel. So what?
Yeah, it always it's just one of the my favorite soundtracks, mainly because of the leitmotifs and the just insane use of like different musics, different levels, different harmonizations and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
I've been talking about that for long enough. Do you guys have any favorite
Ooh.
composers?
Yeah, there was
So
something
what
I was
are
wanting to
y'all's
mention.
favorite
You were
composers?
mentioning like for Hornet, they use a lot of strings because I mean that's what the character use. But like I love seeing the different types of instruments some composers can get into, since like I know me and Grayson were talking earlier, or like before the episode started, about SMT4's soundtrack. And one thing I wanted to point out, especially one of my favorite themes from the game, Battle B2, which is the main boss theme, is for the composer Ryota Kozuka, along with some additional compositions by Kenichi Tsuchiya and Toshiki Konishi. They went a long way going baller on the soundtrack. They did a shit ton with like all the instruments, because like here's like a couple of the things they used for like heavy metal themes, or maybe not heavy metal, but like very intense boss battle themes. So quick question: if I was trying to make like a very intimidating boss theme, what is an instrument you guys think I would put in there?
A piccolo.
Okay.
I'd say guitar.
Now, while some of those are still in there, you wanna. Here is one of the instruments that was used
Can I
for
give
Battle
my?
B2.
Well, I was gonna say real quick. Can I give my genuine answer instead of saying a piccolo?
Sure.
I'm gonna say like lots of brass. I think brass can be really like intense if used well.
All great answers, but it doesn't compare to the xylophone.
Oh, the xylophone to go.
Wait, wait. Is there
I
actually a
was
xylophone?
looking up all the instruments they used in Battle B2, and I'm not gonna list all of them, but along with guitar and bass, you know, makes sense, and a synthesizer, they have a xylophone and a didgeridoo in there, like a fucking didgeridoo.
Wait, are you talking about the Australian instrument?
Yeah.
You mean a didgeridoo?
Yeah, the didgeridoo.
Yeah, I'm not even kidding on that.
We
No,
come back.
are you saying it the didgeridoo, like the
Yeah,
Australian?
I think that's what it's-
Didgeridoo. Yeah.
That's actually sick as fuck.
Yeah, which it is a sick ass theme. Please go listen to the SMT4 soundtrack. It is baller, and play the game if you can. Well, hopefully I'll get re-released someday, because again, on the 3DS. But I want to shout them out for like how many different instruments they used and making a xylophone sound badass.
I mean, I think the most important part of that soundtrack is the what is it? The church bells, I think it is.
Oh yeah, they
Or
use
is
a
it the
lot of
chimes?
bells too.
I think
Yeah,
it's
bells-
the chimes actually. Like,
Bells are, in my opinion, bells always go hard in video game soundtracks. I think it's I can't remember which track it is, but there is I think it's a Black and White or Black and White 2 song, and it has bells in it, and it's so good.
I also want to mention this as an aside. Like, if you look up the Battle B2, the boss battle theme, and you look at the view count, you'll notice that it has 10 times, more than 10 times the views as the game has sold copies.
Oh my! I saw someone point that out.
It has
when I
over
was
10
re-listening
million
to it.
views, and the first game to crack over 1 million copies in the Shin Megami Tensei was 5.
that
Although
is
you could count,
funny.
3 if you include her. So.
That's actually okay. I don't know whether to say that's funny or if that's just sad.
Both.
Oh, it's both. The soundtrack is that famous. Like,
Wow, that's fair.
Oh, yeah, I looked it
And,
up.
like-
You were totally right. They used tubular bells.
tubular bells. Yeah,
Tubular bells.
Those are what make the soundtrack. Honestly,
Yeah.
Although
yeah, don't quote me on that, because I just looked it up on like MuseScore.com to like keep the track of like the ensembles and whatnot they used.
yeah, I think it's tubular bells. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
The guitar solo in the part B of this, or part C, is one of the big ones. But yeah.
Oh my god.
I was gonna say, are the bells like surfers? Because they're totally tubular.
Oh my god.
Connor, you must leave the episode now.
Kill yourself.
We are going to play an awesome song to send you off. Please leave.
Now I respect it. I respect that.
Viking funeral.
Nah, bro said I'm gonna be corny, and I respect that shit.
Nah, he ain't getting respected.
I don't to the shredder.
He's getting sent out with the Lego Star Wars soundtrack. You ain't getting nothing
Yo,
serious.
the best soundtrack
I mean,
ever.
not that the soundtrack is bad, but he's not getting a serious send off.
Wait, you're dissing on the best soundtrack in all of video games, bro?
Oh no, I'm
Yeah.
not saying it's bad. I'm
Oh,
saying
yeah.
it's not fitting for the situation.
You get to listen to the Bubsy 3D soundtrack for the rest of your days.
If you guys are gonna send me out, play the Buck Bumble theme. That is,
Nah, you ain't getting that. You get in the Bakugan Battle Brawlers on the Nintendo Wii soundtrack to send you
hey,
off.
don't hate on Bakugan Battle Brawlers, bro.
You gotta listen to the Breaking Bad Nintendo DS soundtrack.
Oh, it's just the main theme, but like crunched insanely.
That I didn't think about it on my 3DS. When I first modded it, one of the first like custom themes I put on there was like a Better Call Saul.
That's really funny.
That's awesome.
That's funny.
God,
That's
but the,
really
but like I kind of want to go back to the point made about the SMT4 soundtrack. This going full circle back to what we said earlier. That just kind of proves that video game soundtracks and having a good soundtrack is one of the most important parts of being a good video game.
Yeah, because more people listen to Battle B2 alone than people have actually played SMT4. Well, though, I guess it is easier to listen to a song on YouTube than play an old game on a 3DS.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I can actually use this as an example. Let me look up a couple things. Let me look up a couple soundtracks here.
Okay.
Yeah. While he
And
does
let me look
that,
at those views.
I do wanna make this point of just because you have a good soundtrack does not mean you're a good game, and the biggest example I have of this is Xenoblade Chronicles 2.
Oh, fuck off. It is a
That
good
game
game.
has
How many videos will go
unironically one of
by?
my favorite soundtracks in all of video games, but also is my least favorite Nintendo game.
I mean, at very least, you respect the soundtrack, so I'll at least respect you on that. Because Drifting Souls is very good,
Exactly.
and Skybender did a great job with it.
Yeah, how many videos will go by without Guy hating on Xenoblade Chronicles 2? I call 0.
Well,
Hey,
I was gonna
I
say
actually
videos
haven't
without
talked about it
me
in
and
a
Guy
while.
arguing about it.
Okay, so I believe I've got what I was looking for. So y'all talked about how it's easier to listen to a soundtrack, and I kind of want to counter that by saying that I've looked up quite a few soundtracks, specifically a few Fire Emblem games and other Shin Megami Tensei soundtracks. And if you look at the Destruction theme, the Shiva theme from SMT5, one of the more popular themes of that game, you can see that that one has about 500k views, which is less than the game has sold copies. The most famous, just a second, I'm looking up another one. The most famous theme from Fire Emblem Echoes, Shadows of Valentia, Twilight of the Gods has 1.6 million views at its peak, which is a little bit more than the game has sold, but not to that egregious of a, not to nearly that egregious of a ratio. And I'll actually...
I'm not saying it's always the case, because, I mean, definitely the people that are going to be listening to the soundtrack the most are the ones who played the game. Because I listened to Battle B2, because I remember how awesome it was when the Minotaur was kicking my ass when I first heard it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I joke about that, but I knew he was Iceweed going in. I swept him. Medusa kicked my ass, though.
Yeah.
That's actually an interesting point. Like, you actually bring up a good thing of like, sometimes like soundtracks in games kind of go unnoticed for some reason. I mean that which is understandable because like the first thing you usually think of a video game like isn't like one specific track most of the time. Like, I don't think anyone in like the Monster Hunter series, when they say Monster Hunter, I don't think they're gonna instantly go to a theme. But meanwhile, like a game like Final Fantasy VII, that'll be different. Like a lot of people will think of like, oh, Sephiroth theme or the boss theme. That's more understandable. But like, I also just think that like the reason as to why like those views are the way they are. It's just that like video games kind of struggle competing with like popular mainstream music because music as like a medium is just as influential, if not more, than movies and video games.
Hmm. I will say one quick
Like, 'cause
thing with
every-
the connections you mentioned. So you mentioned Final Fantasy VII and Monster Hunter. I do think another
Yes.
reason that like they could feel more connected in Final Fantasy VII is to do with the story, because like we mentioned, Monster Hunter, we play it for the gameplay, not the story. So like with the soundtrack, I think it is easier to get connected to it if it hit like during a certain part of the story, like when that character is gone in Final Fantasy VII, everyone remembers that part of the soundtrack and everyone tears up a little. When
Exactly.
when the funny twink with long hair and long sword comes marching in, everyone starts to run because they know he's about to beat your ass.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But going back to my point, it's like the thing is that like video games struggle against like a lot of mainstream music. Like, ask the normal person, like someone who's never played video games before, like what a certain theme is to a game, and they most likely will say like, "Okay, what are you talking about?" Then you ask them like, "Oh, what's this song?" And it's a Taylor Swift song. They'll immediately be able to like pinpoint it out.
White woman moment.
I think some of it could be due to perception, because a lot of my coworkers, like if I mention video game music, they won't think of like Doom, Persona, Rhythm Heaven or
Yeah.
something. That, you know what they think of like half the time, or think what I'm listening to?
Mario music.
Yep, and not even like Galaxy music or something. They think I'm listening to only just the 8-bit hit soundtrack from the NES, like literally just the first Mario Bros theme, and nothing else. Because that's what it is
crazy.
viewed as. It's just viewed as like, oh, the catchy tune from Mario. That's what you listen to. Not like, they don't see it as an emotional track compared to their Taylor Swift songs, or like something that will really like make you want to rock on. No, they see it as this is just a catchy beat, not like an actual music. They
Yeah,
they
but
don't
that's
feel
not,
like
okay,
it's.
but that's not like a.
Sorry, what was
Yeah,
that?
you first. I was gonna say like that's not a negative perception though.
No, I agree in some ways it is. Just as in like it's a very limited view of like what it actually is.
I get that. Yeah, okay, that's fair. Like, it's okay. It's a damaging view, but it's not exactly a negative, if that makes sense.
No, I see what you mean. But at the same time, most
Yeah,
of
it's
the
like-
people I hear this from are the same motherfuckers that are like, nah, y'all and yo video games. Back in my
Yeah,
day, we
so-
didn't
so
have
for-
them.
So poopy heads.
Yeah, we didn't go outside. We went outside.
We went outside when I was a boy. I had a drink from the water hose.
Yeah, I do work with a lot of old heads, so maybe that's my issue.
Probably.
Though even young people,
Your perception's a little warped there. But
well, even younger workers too, like a lot of them that are just a little older than me, so, or like Grayson's age,
Yeah.
so.
oh, Grayson's an old man. Oh,
Bring out the cane.
yeah. Are you okay there, Grandpa? Do you?
Grayson, do you need your cane, reclining chair, and hard candies?
I'm sorry, if the DS is older than you, shut up.
Sorry, Connor.
Yeah, I guess I have no opinion now.
Connor's opinion is non-existent.
Just as a reminder, Grayson, when did the DS come out?
2004.
What month, if you know?
I think it was like October, November. Let me check real quick.
Oh yeah, I'm 1 year older than the DS.
So, Connor, when were you born?
2005.
November 21st, 2004.
You know what that means? The DS was able to vote before Connor.
You know, that's true. The DS turns 20 years old this year.
Damn, the DS is gonna be able to legally
Meanwhile, Connor
drink
just
before
turned
Connor
19.
is.
Connor just turned 19.
Oh yeah, when the DS turns 21, I need to take a picture of my DS next to it, like a picture of like fucking Fireball or something. It's like, oh Connor, look what my DS can do, but you can't.
Glug, glug, glug.
Not legally.
Down
Shout
the
out to
hatch.
the DS for being able to drink legally.
Remember,
Holy
kids.
shit.
Remember, kids. It's always morally correct to drink and drive.
And for legal reasons,
Funny.
that's a joke, so we don't get sued.
Man,
That is true. That is true.
I truly wish I had something to stop my truck driving God's largest tree.
God, I really wish there was a way to make driving fun. I feel the keys in my pocket and see the liquor in front of me. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Man, this
Who would
social-
win?
But
Who would win? God's drunkest driver or God's strongest tree?
Shit, that's a hard one. It's like a question of like a sword that cuts everything versus a shield that blocks everything. I think they just both break.
I saw a shirt that said God's drunkest driver, and then in smaller text said "Sorry, Grandma."
oh my god.
So messed up. Okay, well, with the topic we're on,
Let's
how
shift
about we
back to
just
our
wrap
topic.
up by just talking about maybe some just games in general that have soundtracks that we really enjoy, or maybe incorporate their soundtracks in interesting ways.
I was gonna say, I think a game that does like that is both very good and also incorporates its soundtrack incredibly well. We've talked about it a few times, but Mario Galaxy. And no, this is not just because Mario Galaxy is my favorite game ever. It is. It is not. It's because it was the first Mario game to have a full like orchestral soundtrack, and so you can tell they really wanted it to, give off that vibe, because the Mario Galaxy soundtrack to me is like pure like ethereal magic. Like every track hits hard. Every single like music piece really feels like you are on a grand space adventure.
Yeah, I don't
That's
really
awesome,
know
man.
how to describe the feeling of flying through space because I've never been, but yeah, they matched it pretty good. I guess the closest thing I could have is the feeling of when I'm flying around without a seatbelt in my car with the funny drink in my body.
True. I'll go next. I'll go next. One game I want to bring up that I feel like y'all are gonna like. You're gonna agree with me on this one. That I feel like the music really sets in a really like well-paced tone and also gets you like feeling very emotional. Is God of War 2018.
Oh my god, that is such a good soundtrack.
I think
Wait.
the
Do you
What?
wait, guy? Who's the protagonist of God of War?
I'm not answering that.
No, who is he?
He's the God of War.
No, what's his name, guy?
He's the white guy with the beard.
Kratos.
That sounds a lot like the guy who hasn't shown up in the Fortnite item shop.
Oh my god. Okay, Connor,
But,
you officially do actually have to leave the episode now.
Oh,
No getting to talk about any games you like. Out.
If I leave, then everyone leaves because this is my studio.
We will record on a separate studio.
But,
If there's a will, there's a way.
As I was saying, God of War, in 2018 especially, they do an excellent job of matching the music with the scene, and God, I had to give the composers and the directors so much credit because they match the scene, like the music with the scene perfectly. They don't let the music overwhelm the dialogue. They don't let the dialogue overwhelm the music in any way, shape, or form, and they have the perfect notes to build the scene up while also having the proper pace for how a scene should go. If there's a scene where you are being hyped up the soundtrack will raise its volume and you'll start hearing vocals and drums starting to beat. If there's a scene where you're going to cry, then the game will build that up with instrumentals and orchestra to eventually have like one big climax and then like one drop off that perfectly encapsulates how I feel about the game as well. Sorry for my little rant there, but I feel like God of War just like encapsulates what a good soundtrack should be.
Oh no, that Bear McCreary did a very good job with the soundtrack. I love the God of War soundtrack.
It's so good.
It had, like you mentioned, it had that perfect balance of like slowing down for like the more like emotional moments where you really want to connect with the characters versus I want to fucking kick this Valkyrie's ass.
Yeah.
Because they really knew how to mix it up.
They do. Let's let Grayson go last because he's the guest.
I haven't gone.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Let's let Grayson go last.
Oh,
so
okay.
That he
No,
can...
I thought you were leading into
Rude.
He'll go last and then we end the episode.
No, okay, no, I get what you mean.
Brewer's
Yeah,
opinion
you go
gets
next one.
deleted.
Brewer's opinion does not exist.
Okay, the one I wanted to mention, and I hate that I couldn't mention this one earlier, but it just wasn't matching with the topics we had, is Rhythm Heaven. To be more specific, Megamix, because I recently played it. I want to kill Nintendo for not re-releasing those games, because they would be so damn easy to port. And God, I slept on it for way too long, because I think rhythm games in general, I'd like to get into them more, because that's I think genre of games that I just haven't touched on too much, or that I think anyone in the podcast really has. And Rhythm Heaven was such a great one to try out, because it literally, like, the games cannot work without the soundtrack, and the soundtrack cannot work without the games, because they're just mixed into each other. So they have a lot of variety. They'll have one where you're on the ringside, where you're a wrestler who's answering questions, and it makes a really catchy beat. You have other ones where you're a bunch of birds that are having to keep into a flock step. You have another one called Lockstep, where you're in beat with a bunch of other people, and you're having to constantly tap the A button to match the beat of everyone else. Like, the soundtrack is so damn catchy, and it perfectly does the job of like mixing the soundtrack into the gameplay, because quite literally you cannot hear the perfect versions of the song if you can't feel the beat with it. Like, if you mess up in the game, the song's not going to hit because the character's just going to fail. And it just has so much personality as well that like makes me like actually get into it when I see the characters getting up to their wacky antics. Like, please play Rhythm Heaven if you haven't, or if you have a way to play it, because I slept in it for way too long.
And that's fair too, because like there's a lot of edits of that game too. It's just like the music especially has left an impact on people, because I constantly see new edits of Rhythm Heaven for like different games and whatnot. So I think that's really fair that like, they should re-release it.
I see so many like different like animated things too. Like, one of my favorite songs, I think, in Megamix was one with like these two sumo brothers. Had like a Japanese type song where like you were basically doing a mock sumo match in a game. And I saw someone made a really cool recreation of that with like these two Charizards like being the sumo wrestlers, with a Pichu in the background being the referee. It's like such a nice animation that shows like a lot of the love the fans had for the game. That, or remixes like I like a lot of Jack Stober's music, and someone made a really nice remix of Buttercup with like the Rhythm Heaven characters.
Oh, I love Jack Stober's music. He's an excellent composer. If y'all have not listened to his songs, y'all have probably listened to Buttercup before on edits before, but he's a great artist. He really is.
Oh yeah.
But I guess last one, Grayson, it's all yours, man.
Alright, there are actually a couple things I want to talk about. So one of the main things I wanted to talk about was the leitmotif, or the leitmotif, however you want to pronounce it. And so usually, like, you'll hear a lot of themes and you'll recognize that theme from a different game. Like, normally, everyone recognizes the Mario theme. They recognize how that's incorporated into different Mario games and how it slightly varies, or very, very famously, the Final Fantasy chromatic scale that plays at the beginning of every single Final Fantasy game. With practically without exception, even Final Fantasy X managed to incorporate the main chromatic theme, the chromatic scale, in the Xanarkand theme, which was kind of a more rustic, well, not rustic, perhaps, but a more energized, like, big city theme. It's a lot faster of a theme than you're used to, and that's kind of giving you the idea of, what the main character is like, and how this world that he's in is right before we get set up into, him being thrust into this primitive, no technology land. And even in Final Fantasy 15, you don't hear the main theme really until all the way towards the end of the game against Ifrit, during the Hellfire theme in the last phase. So, weirdly enough, like, leitmotifs are outlandishly good because you recognize them, and I'm sure this might have been talked about at the previous podcast, but the Soul of Cinder theme, the final boss of Dark Souls 3,
You are my goat, Grayson, for mentioning this. I did mention it last time, but go for it.
But, so, halfway through the Soul of Cinder theme, when you deplete the first health bar, he does a little fancy movement, he slams his sword down, it catches on fire, he pulls it up, and then you hear the very, very well-known piano of the, what everyone calls the plin plon of the game, and you recognize that instantly, and that's when everything clicks, right? And it is a theme that I hear constantly, that I replay constantly in my head, and that I enjoy constantly when it happens. But also, I want to also mention, I guess for general games that do soundtracks nearly perfectly, I want to mention the Octopath Traveler duology.
Ooh.
Real quick, I will say, I'm really wanting to play Octopath Traveler 1, so just spoilers.
I'll keep it spoiler free. Now, well, I'll do my best. I believe I won't say like names or anything like that, but I won't mention the name of the final boss or anything like that, but I'll mention
Yeah. I've heard snippets of the Octopath 2 soundtrack, and Octopath 2 is on my shelf, and like whenever I remember those parts of the soundtrack, I'm like, it is tempting me, but also it probably takes like 80 hours to beat, so
it is a long game, yes.
Gotta be Persona first.
Yes, it is a long game. It is definitely a game I played day one. So one thing you might actually, Octopath 1 is like a proof of concept for the HD 2D like genre of, RPGs. It finally allows us to play turn-based RPGs, turn-based pixelated RPGs no less, in a modern era, without AAA companies going, no, that's wrong, make it 3D or make it action RPG or whatever else. They're allowed to preserve the sanctity of, those games are allowed to be celebrations of their roots, really, and the Octopath soundtrack is genuinely one of my favorite soundtracks of just all time, across all three games. Yes, I say all three games because Octopath Traveler has a gacha game, and that gacha game's soundtrack is one of the best soundtracks you will ever hear in your life. I am not joshing you, I am not joking, I am not memeing. I am being genuine. Now, I need to open my door real quick. Stop being obnoxious.
Your cat's wanting to hit up the Baller soundtrack.
Yeah, I just wanted to say hi to him for a second. But, so, one thing that's happening is that, Jesus Christ. So, one thing that Octopath Traveler does is that it actually, I'm gonna hold on to you for a second. But one thing that the Octopath Traveler soundtrack actually does is that it is very well known for its transitions. So the transitional themes are insanely well known for a lot of reasons. So let me break it down in the best way I absolutely can. So there are 8 characters in every game. In both games, there are 8 themes for each character. There are 5 boss battle themes for both games. So what happens is that you can actually transition. So every single character has their own transitional theme, their own main theme, and their transitional theme that transitions into the battle theme. It is a short 4-bar theme that actually manages to shift from their character's theme to the boss battle theme genuinely seamlessly, and they do this by having every single measure of that transition theme be able to flawlessly move into the transitional theme, which then transitions into the boss battle theme. Now, what it has been recognized is that every single character's theme transitions perfectly, but not just that. Every single character's theme from both games transitions perfectly into the boss battle themes of different games. So, the character Oswald in Octopath Traveler 2, his theme can actually flawlessly transition into the boss battle 2 theme of Octopath Traveler 1.
That's so sick, actually.
Yeah, it's actually sick.
It goes back to the thing I was mentioning, where like with transitioning really helps like elevate it, but like that takes it up to another level with like past referencing.
Yeah, and that's another thing, is that the starting of like the first little notes of every battle theme, it carries a different energy. Now, I'll use Octopath 2 as reference because Octopath 2 has the better soundtrack in my opinion. The first boss battle theme is kind of like a, slow rise, it's more of a tension kind of theme because it's the first boss of every character, right? So it's more tension heavy than anything else. And surprisingly, you transition the same like level of perfection as you would the boss battle 2 theme, which opens up immediately with one of the loudest trumpets you will ever hear in your entire life. And then this transitions well into the third boss battle theme, which is, in Octopath 1, that is the final boss for each path theme, that is classified as, in Octopath 1, it's called Battle at Journey's End. In Octopath 2, it is called For the Dawn. And these themes are kind of like, they have their own early transitional themes that kind of erupt into their final, this is the final boss type theme. But it gets even better because what Octopath Traveler 2 did was it took everything you've just heard about, and what it has managed to do is that the final boss battle of every character's path has a Phase 2. And what they don't do is you don't hear the same theme for Phase 2. What you do is you have characters' main themes incorporated into the final boss theme.
Knowing, just so the audience knows real quick, knowing that there's a lot of different characters you can choose from in Octopath makes that even cooler.
There are 8 characters in both Octopath games. So in Octopath 2, every character's main theme sounds different. You have Ochette.
They made 8 different themes for it.
Yep. They have Ochette the Ranger, who, she's a little more woodsy, You have Agnea the Dancer, so hers is a lot more preppy, a lot more chippy. You've got Temenos the shifty, like detective type, so his is a little bit more mysterious, and his is, you hear him being a little more like, I'm a little funny guy, I'm a little snarky. And you hear Oswald, whose theme actually incorporates like pickaxes hitting ore because he starts the game out as a slave. So what happens is that when the game transitions to its second phase, or the boss battles transition to their second phase, what happens is that the first phase, the first part of the final boss battle theme actually changes to be a more intense version of each individual character's themes turned into like its own boss battle theme. So not only is this theme their own theme for a transition into the boss battle theme, but they also turned this transition theme into its own boss battle music that again flawlessly fits in. So what I would recommend is I would actually recommend everyone listening to it's For the Dawn, and for each character, like, they all have their own different motives. So, like, for revenge, for freedom, for truth, for whatever else. So, like, you can actually listen to how each theme incorporates into the boss battle theme as part of the theme. And then it was also discovered.
Yeah, that's amazing, man.
And it was also
awesome, yeah.
finally discovered that, despite the fact that there isn't a transitional theme for this, there are two super boss themes that you can hear in each game. Well, not each game. There's one super boss theme for each game that's not directed to the true final boss. Those boss themes you could actually technically transition into them, despite the fact that you don't.
That, like, this has a lot of diverse
you just
soundtracks, and that's good. That's good to have, especially for a game that's like 70 to 80 hours long. You know what I mean? You don't want to have the same repetitive theme going over and over and over. You know what I mean? One thing to note about this, like, in total with music, is just that it's so essential to gaming, and you don't even realize it. And when you look back on video games, the sounds that come from it and just the music that is composed is so essential to the experience overall. But it's just, God, it's so impactful for all of us. It really is. But if you guys like this kind of content, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you can get notified on more content like this.
Yeah, maybe comment like one of your favorite soundtracks in a game or something really cool you think it did. Then, maybe put an instrument in there as well. Like, hit that like button with a didgeridoo.
Start a feud in the comments about Square Enix versus Atlas.
Oh no, not that.
Start a full-blown argument.
Please, I want to see that.
The instigator.
Instigating 101 by Grayson.
I'll join in on both sides. I'll make two different accounts and I'll argue with myself and see who agrees with which one more.
I would love to see that. Grayson, thank you again for joining us on today's episode. You've been an excellent guest, and I thank you so much for being willing to do this with us.
Hurrah!
But with that being said, guys, we've been Fetchquest, and this has been our second episode on soundtracks and video games. Thank you guys very much. See you later.
Bye. Thanks for watching.
Bye.